Matias Del Campo is an architect, educator, and co-founder of SPAN, known for integrating AI and machine learning into architectural design and exploring their impact on form and authorship. We will learn more about him all along our presentation.
In his essay on Du mode d'existence des objets techniques, 1958, Schmidgen traces Simondon's thinking through three distinct movements. This results in an intellectual journey that resonates remarkably well with the current relationship between AI and architecture. When discussing machines, or technical objects, as Simondon calls them, we often ask, what do we want from machines? Today, the same question is repeatedly posed to AI. Yet a more fundamental question is rarely considered. What does the machine want? Before answering that question, let us first look at these technical objects that surround us every day: a watch, a radio, a light bulb, a camera, even the electric toothbrush you used this morning. Take a moment to consider them. They are so familiar that we rarely notice them anymore. Now, looking at these objects, ask yourself, do you actually want to understand these objects? Or do you simply ignore them, taking them for granted as long as they continue to function? In a state of ignorance, technical objects appear to us as black boxes. We do not understand their internal processes, their logic, or their evolution. We simply see the input and the output. They seem almost magical, quietly producing exactly the result we need. Simondon does not simply describe this as a lack of knowledge. This ignorance or avoidance can actually be seen through two different ways. Let's look into those images. What do you see? By Barthes, the Citroën seems as a goddess, respected, worshipped, almost sacred. Other examples include the last iPhone release or most recently the AP Times Swatch collaboration. And now let's look at this. In the case of AI, data centers and computational infrastructure are often kept far from view, almost invisible to the people who use them every day. This is where Simondon identifies two opposite, yet closely related ways of avoiding a genuine understanding of technical objects. We either ignore them completely, treating them as black boxes whose inner workings do not concern us, or we elevate them to something almost mythical, attributing to them powers they do not actually possess. In both cases, the result is the same. We fail to understand the machine itself. We either dismiss it or worship it, but rarely do we engage with it. Which brings us to our next revelation. It is not humanity that has become enslaved to machines. The machines have been reduced to the status of servants, subordinated entirely to human needs and desires, as we continue being completely indifferent to what they are. To understand this, let's bring it to an example. As we have Del Campo with us today, let's bring it to AI. Let's take a look at the Robot Garden, an outdoor garden at the University of Michigan's Robotics Building, inaugurated in 2021. It is revolutionary because the design of the ground and the textures of the garden were not designed by an architect sitting with a mouse. What they did was take satellite images of the terrain, train a neural network with thousands of images of architectural elements, and then let the network dream those elements onto the image of the site. When AI designs a building, something weird and interesting happens, and it is too weird and interesting to simply dismiss. The result is a landscape that looks natural but has a strange artificiality. The forms are not what a human would have chosen. They are what a machine saw when it tried to see architecture in an empty terrain, which leads us to our next chapter. What if we open the box? So, what does Simondon do when he faces the machine? He does not theorize, he does not worship, he does not ignore, he opens it. This is what he called concretization. Simondon noticed that when engineers try to make a machine perfect, fully automated, self contained, optimized for one task, something strange happens. The machine becomes less technically sophisticated, not more. A robot that does exactly one thing flawlessly has no room left inside it. It is closed. The machines Simondon considered truly advanced were the ones that had a kind of deliberate incompleteness built in, gaps where the world could enter, where a human could intervene, where the machine could couple with other machines or respond to changing conditions. He called this gap the margin of indetermination. The margin of indetermination here is in the tool itself. The planer is not fully determining what happens. It leaves room for the material to speak, for the worker, to respond. The tool is in dialogue with the wood and with the human simultaneously. That is where the skill lives, not in the tool, not in the hand, but in the space between them. The planer doesn't decide what the wood will become. It holds open a question. And this is exactly where we arrive at one of the most uncomfortable questions in the room right now. Can a machine hold open a question of its own? Not just respond to the material, not just transmit signals back to the hand, but actually reach into a space that wasn't there before and pull something out of it that nobody put in. In other words, can AI be creative? Can something truly new emerge from a dataset of existing designs?
To answer this question, we asked another question. What is creativity? Let's look into this image. This is a vision of a fully electric Ferrari created with generative AI. The result looks visually impressive and convincing, but it's also immediately readable. We can already see the pattern behind it. A bit of familiar futurism, the recognizable signs of the brand projected forward. This seductive smoothness of modern technical objects, also discussed by Simondon, is probably not what we are looking for when we want something new. This image is taken from a very interesting post by Arturo Tedeschi about this topic. So again, what is creativity? There are three types of creativity. 1. Combinational creativity, combining existing ideas in improbable ways. 2. Exploratory creativity, navigating the boundaries of structured conceptual spaces. 3. Transformational creativity, changing the rules of the space itself. Let's look into the estrangement and defamiliarization effect. Estrangement was introduced by Russian formalist Viktor Shklovsky in 1917 in his article Art as Technique. The main characteristic of this concept is to take something familiar, something like in everyday objects or situations, and introduce enough strange qualities to increase the attention of the observer. The method of estrangement was picked up also by German theater director Bertolt Brecht. Brecht's technique for estrangement included abstract stage design, projection of captions, and actors breaking the fourth wall. The goal was to distance the audience, reminding them of the artificiality of the theater performance, in order to encourage the audience to engage with the play intellectually instead of emotionally. He wanted them to think instead of feel. An example of the application of these concepts is the Deep House project, commissioned to Span by neuroscientists to design of a modern residential home using methods that combine insights from neuroscience with computational design methodologies. He was looking for something different, not new. The Deep House project, named after one of the core techniques used in its design deep learning. It uses two specific datasets, a modern facade dataset and a plan dataset, and the datasets were trained using StyleGAN 2. The goal was not to achieve perfect smoothness, but on the contrary to challenge the algorithm by intentionally using overfitting or data scarcity to create the uncanny, estranged, and defamiliarized results, deliberately choosing estrangement over accuracy. The result: the use of estrangement as a method to emancipate the design of a house from a canonical approach, something different, something strange but familiar enough. The AI-generated result is strange because it has its own interior logic you haven't fully opened. Simondon would say, open it. Find the margin of indetermination. Don't just receive the output, become the conductor.
So far, we've treated AI as a tool, a brush in the hand of the designer. But that metaphor breaks down with someone like Matias Del Campo. He is not an artist who picks up AI as a new brush. He is a conductor, because the AI is not really the instrument. The instrument is the whole relationship, human intention, the dataset, the latent space, the selections we make, and the material that finally takes form. 2. And this is exactly what Simondon saw decades ago. Far from being the supervisor of a squad of slaves, he wrote, man is the permanent organizer of a society of technical objects, which need him as much as musicians in an orchestra need a conductor. Notice the shift, not a master commanding slaves, but an organizer holding an ensemble together. 3. And here is the key. A conductor does not dominate the orchestra. The conductor listens. For Simondon, the good technician keeps each machine's margin of indetermination open. He attends, adjusts, and interprets, but never fully automates. To conduct is to listen, to hold all the voices together without silencing any of them. 4. In Del Campo's own writing, his Intersections paper, he gives this a name. Creativity is not a metaphysical spark. It is an inferential process, distributed across the human, the machine, and the material. The architect becomes a mediator, selecting, interpreting, and translating the model's statistical relations into something cultural, something spatial. He is reading the orchestra and shaping what it plays. 5. Simondon went one step further. He called for representatives of technical beings, a voice for machines inside human culture. Someone has to speak for the orchestra. 6. And that someone, in this room with us, is Matias Del Campo. He has spent his career doing exactly that, advocating for the cultural significance of AI as a design entity, not a tool to be supervised, but a participant to be conducted. Which leaves us with one question. The question was never whether the machine can create, it is whether we can still conduct. Everything we open tonight, all the chaos inside the black box, comes back together here, in order, because our job was never to work with scrambled information. The black box already does that. What matters is how we rationalize it. So now it is your turn. The human took on the task of rationalizing the data. Now it is the AI's turn to answer, and your turn to think. Ask it anything about Simondon, about Del Campo, about the black box. Go ahead, open the conversation.